The room was quiet when the order came through and my hands did not stop moving. I copied the words exactly as taught, knowing my superiors were waiting. Only later did the silence stretch too long and the map no longer agreed with the log. I understood then that obedience had redirected men I could not see. If stories like this matter, consider subscribing to keep them remembered. On July 14th, 1943, the Allied invasion of Sicily was entering its 5th day. British forces were advancing inland from the southeastern coast. The terrain was dry, broken, and poorly mapped. Communications depended on field telephones, runners, and fragile radio links. At the headquarters of a British infantry brigade near Lentini, a temporary signals room had been set up inside a requisitioned farmhouse. The walls were thick stone. Windows were covered with blankets to block light at night. Cables ran through doorways and across the floor, taped down where possible. The operational situation was unsettled. German rearguard units were withdrawing north, but counterattacks were expected. Orders changed frequently as intelligence arrived late or incomplete. The brigade had been tasked with securing a crossroads that controlled movement toward Catania. Inside the signals room, the work was routine and unremarkable. Messages were received, logged, and passed onward. Most were short, grid references, timings, acknowledgements. The man responsible for the message log that morning was a junior signals corporal. He had been in uniform since 1941. His role was not command. He handled paper, pencil, and the steady discipline of procedure. And the signals room was quiet for long stretches. Occasional bursts of static came through the wireless. Field telephones rang irregularly. Most communication came through line, not radio. By mid-morning, the brigade commander was awaiting confirmation from divisional headquarters. An infantry battalion forward of the brigade line had reported resistance near a low ridge. The battalion requested clarification on whether to press forward or hold. The request went up the chain. The response was delayed. Lines had been damaged overnight by shelling. A repair party was already out. Until the line was restored, messages were being relayed through an alternate route. At 10:40 p.m, a message arrived from divisional headquarters. It came through a secondary line. The signal was weak but legible. The corporal received the message, read it once, up then again. He transcribed it into the log. He followed the format exactly. The message concerned battalion movement. It referenced a grid coordinate and a time. It used language common in field orders. There was nothing obviously unusual about it. No emphasis marks, no repetition. The corporal passed the message to the duty officer in the adjacent room. The officer read it quickly. He nodded and moved on to other matters. Within minutes, the order was relayed forward. A runner was sent. The battalion acknowledged receipt. Shortly afterward, the signals room fell silent again. The silence was not remarkable at first. Gaps in communication were expected. Lines were stretched. Equipment was unreliable. But by early afternoon, the pattern began to concern the signal staff. The forward battalion had not reported in. And no progress updates had been received. Attempts to raise them by line failed. Radio contact was intermittent and unclear. At brigade headquarters, the assumption was that the battalion was moving according to orders. The terrain between the old position and the objective was uneven but not impassable. At 2 p.m, another message arrived from division. This one referenced the same battalion. Its tone was brief and corrective. The corporal logged it. He noticed a difference in phrasing, a small one, a change in preposition. He compared it to the earlier message. The grid reference was similar but not identical. He brought the log to the duty officer. The officer read both messages side by side. He paused. The silence in the signals room deepened. The officer consulted the brigade major. Maps were spread on the table. As fingers traced grid squares, it became clear that the earlier order had been misread. Not by the corporal alone, not by a single person. The wording allowed for interpretation. A directional phrase had been taken to indicate advance along a route, rather than repositioning to a flank. The battalion had not advanced toward the intended objective. It had redirected east, away from brigade support. The silence now had weight. Attempts were made to re-establish contact. Runners were dispatched. Wireless sets were adjusted. By late afternoon, fragments of information returned. The battalion had encountered resistance in an unexpected sector. German elements had not fully withdrawn there. Casualties were reported. Numbers were unclear. The brigade commander requested immediate clarification from a division. Division responded with urgency. After the original order was reviewed, staff officers traced its transmission path. The wording had been dictated under pressure. It had passed through 2 relay points. No single error could be isolated. The misdirection was cumulative. As evening approached, artillery support was redirected. The battalion was ordered to disengage and regroup. Night fell before full contact was restored. When reports finally came in, they were incomplete. Losses had been sustained. Several platoons had been scattered. The corporal remained at his post. He logged each message carefully. His handwriting remained steady. No one raised their voice in the signals room. There was no accusation, only procedure. The following day, an after-action review was conducted at brigade level. The misread order was noted. The language of the message was examined. The conclusion was restrained. Communications under field conditions were imperfect. Procedures had been followed. The battalion was reassembled over the next 48 hours. Its advance resumed along a corrected axis. The corporal was not mentioned in the report. Neither was the duty officer. The incident was absorbed into the broader narrative of the campaign. It did not alter strategic outcomes. It did not appear in headlines. But within the signals room, procedures were adjusted. Orders referencing movement were now read aloud by 2 men. Grid references were checked against maps before relay. The changes were minor. They were not formally mandated. They were adopted quietly. The war moved on. Months later in Italy, and again in Northwest Europe, similar silences would occur in other signals rooms. Lines would fail. Their messages would arrive incomplete. The men handling them would continue to work without visibility or recognition. The battalion involved in Sicily received replacements. Its losses were recorded. The misread order remained a footnote in operational logs. For those present, it was a reminder, not of heroism, but of how routine work, performed under strain, could redirect men across unfamiliar ground. At the end of the war, the corporal returned to civilian life. His service record listed no distinction, only dates and units. The signals room farmhouse near Lentini returned to civilian use. The cables were removed, the blankets came down, no marker was placed. The silence that once filled the room left no trace. After Sicily, the brigade moved north with the rest of 8th Army. Operations became larger and more formal. Signal sections expanded, equipment improved incrementally. The misread order was not revisited at higher levels. Divisional summaries focused on terrain gained and resistance overcome. Individual incidents were compressed into general language. Within the brigade, however, the episode influenced daily routine. Signals personnel became more cautious. Clarifications were requested more often. This caution was not always welcomed. Staff officers under pressure preferred speed. Questions could be seen as delay. On several occasions, signals NCOs were reminded to pass orders as received. Interpretation was not their role, yet the habit of quiet verification remained. 2 men reading a message, a pause before relay. As the campaign continued into mainland Italy, communications problems multiplied. A mountainous terrain distorted radio signals, weather-damaged lines. Errors did not disappear. They shifted form. Sometimes a grid reference was correct, but the map was outdated. Sometimes a unit name was misheard over static. Losses occurred for many reasons, rarely for one reason alone. In training notes circulated later in 1943, communications were mentioned briefly. The language was cautious. Clear phrasing, advised. Confirmation where practicable. No examples were given. The corporal from Sicily was promoted later that year. The promotion followed time served, not incident. His new responsibilities were administrative. He continued to work in signals units until 1945. His service took him to Italy and then to Northwest Europe. He did not keep a diary, he did not give interviews. After demobilization, he returned to civilian employment. His wartime skills had little direct application. In later years, he spoke rarely of the war. When he did, it was in general terms: heat, dust, waiting. The signals room near Lentini was never mentioned. In official histories, battalion movements in mid-July 1943 are summarized in a paragraph. They note resistance and progress. They do not mention silence. The misread order exists only in surviving logs and marginal notes, paper that was never meant to endure. Such moments were common across the war. Not decisive, not dramatic. They occurred in rooms without windows, among men whose names did not appear in reports. The machinery of war depended on them regardless.